All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Ron Brown. I live in Mesa, Arizona for the winter. Let me talk a little bit about my background. My wife and I live in Comox, British Columbia. That's on the west coast of Canada, um, about 150 miles north of Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. When we also have a second home in Mesa, Arizona, where we are now. So we do a lot of traveling between Comox and of course, Mesa, Arizona. We have one daughter. We have two daughters. One of them lives in Beijing, China, with her family, and that's a whole other story that I'm sure there will be lots of questions about. But so our second daughter is married with her family, and they live in Adelaide, Australia. So we travel between here and Canada and Beijing and Australia. So I spend most of my time on airplanes or cruise lines. So I also teach technology in the winter here in Arizona. So I put this program together called Staying Connected While Traveling because I found a lot of people I talked to had difficulty while they were traveling, staying connected with their families. So this is the presentation. It has been produced as an APCUG presentation and is available on YouTube. If you just Google on YouTube or search on YouTube, Staying Connected, and you'll see the presentation. Now, let's just get going here. Okay, hold on. So why stay connected? I think that there are changing attitudes towards this now. Obviously, it's an information highway. As you travel, you need information regarding things that you want to do. So the best way is to stay connected. Many of you, if you're traveling away for longer periods of time, have financial investments, and maybe you want to keep track of these and make changes in your portfolio. Certainly there's healthcare. Many of you have healthcare problems and you want to stay connected to your healthcare provider. So healthcare is an important reason to stay connected. And of course, there's the social aspect as well. And I don't want to talk about the dreaded Facebook addiction. Does anybody there look at Facebook? I'm sure there's lots of you. I'm just kidding. But anyway, that certainly is a problem. Now, where to get the information? Oftentimes, travel agents don't understand this technology, so not a good resource. So you can sometimes contact your destination directly, travel blogs, or social media, or you can listen to this presentation. Now, today I want to talk a little bit about some of the terminology that will help us understand how to stay connected. I want to make sure everybody understands what a hotspot is. I want to make sure everybody understands the difference between Wi-Fi and cellular data. You need to talk, when we talk about data plans, you need to understand what data capping is, what a tiered connection is, and what roaming fees are. We're briefly going to talk about VPNs and also SIM cards. So before we can get into the actual understanding of this, we need to know what these words actually mean. So what is a Wi-Fi hotspot? This is where we can actually take your phone, and you'll see the phone on the upper left-hand corner here. You can use your phone, which has a cellular data connection, and it can broadcast a Wi-Fi signal. And we call this a Wi-Fi hotspot. Now this is an encrypted, your cellular data is encrypted, so it is totally secure. It has easy access, but it can be a bit costly if you're going to do it that way. But that's what a Wi-Fi hotspot is. It's not on all phones. You'll have to check with your cell phone provider and see if you have that ability on your phone to broadcast. Most unlimited data plans don't allow hotspots. Some do, some don't. And it's not available on every phone. So it's important before you leave is to check with your provider, check with your phone, and see if you have the ability to use it as a hotspot, and that will make it much easier to get a Wi-Fi connection while you travel. Now, if we talk about Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, it's often free. We'll talk about a lot of the security concerns regarding that, and you have to find a Wi-Fi access point. So the Wi-Fi that would be free would be in your hotel, it may be in restaurants, but it's public Wi-Fi. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the security concerns with public Wi-Fi. Now, the type of phone signals that you get on your cell phone are four. There's the cellular signal, which is the data plan. So this is the connection through your cellular carrier. If you think about talking on your phone, on your cell phone, this is through the data side of your phone, and this is the same as you would be receiving your internet signal. It would be through the data side. Now, then there's the Wi-Fi signal, which is different. It's a different signal, and this is connected usually to a Wi-Fi access point. Now, this does not necessarily connect you to the internet. An example of this we'll be talking about is when you go on a cruise ship. Most of the cruise ships now, you use your cell phone to access their Wi-Fi. It's not an internet connection, but it's a connection to the intranet of the ship, and that's how you book your trips and how you book your reservations through their services. There's also Bluetooth on your phone, and Bluetooth is the way you can connect a lot of devices. This is the Bluetooth signal, and you can often connect headphones and devices to your phone through Bluetooth. Now, the last one is not on all phones. It's called NFC. This is called near field connection, and this is a type of communication that is very short. It only is about 2 or 3 inches, and this is what Apple Pay and all the devices use, or when you do tap and pay. It uses an NFC signal. Again, it's not on all phones, but that's how the tap and pay goes with Apple Pay and so on and so forth. So there are 4 actually signals that your phone gives off. Now, when you look at the terminology, and we're talking about roaming and data caps, let's take example. If you lived, a common connection down here is Cox. So if you had a Cox cable account and you watched Netflix, you had a lot of Internet of Things devices, maybe Amazon Prime, and you were using that, you may be going through 20 or 30 gigabytes a month, but there's lots of data associated with a cable connection. But not so if you were connected through your data plan or your mobile connection. You would probably find that there's a limit to the amount of data that you could download, and that depends on what plan you have. But you may find that after a certain amount of data that you're downloading, you would run into data capping. And that's when they would either, sometimes it's tiered, and what tiered mean is it could drop from 4G to 2G. In other words, the speed would dramatically cut down after a certain amount of data. And this is what data capping is. And this is available, this is usually present on most plans, and again, it's unique to different plans. And then, of course, there's the roaming charges. The amazing thing about these cellular phones and devices that we have is they work anywhere in the world. You can take your phone to any part of this world and just turn it on and you'll be connected. I wouldn't advise that because all these companies have your credit card and you're going to get a huge bill at the end because of what we call roaming charges. When you travel, if you travel throughout the United States, most of the carriers have reciprocity, so it doesn't really matter what carrier you're on. But if you travel to other parts of the world, different countries, their cell towers are paid for by different people. So when you use those cell charges, you have to pay, and that's called a roaming charge. And roaming charges can add up. They could be as much as $8 or $10 a day. So you want to be careful on that, and you want to understand what roaming charges are. My advice to you is if you are planning on traveling abroad, that you check with your cell phone provider and find out what the roaming charges would be for the countries you're going to go. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, I wanted to talk, many of you, we've talked about public Wi-Fi and why that might be dangerous for you. And you've probably heard a lot about VPNs. I'm not sure if your group has I've been teaching technology for about 10 years now, and VPNs are a common topic. So it's something I'm very familiar with. And most people would recommend that you use a VPN if you're traveling and you're going to use public Wi-Fi. Now, I'm going to say that, and that's sort of the party line, but I want to say that life is changing a lot, and public Wi-Fi is not as dangerous as it used to be. And that is largely centered around the fact that public Wi-Fi now, most websites are what we call HTTPS. And the S means it's secure because it's encrypted data. And about 80% now of all websites are HTTPS. In fact, the new Chrome browser and various browsers will actually warn you if a site is not HTTPS. In fact, in Europe, with the Europe Economic Community, any data that's stored on a website, which could just mean that your first and last name, must by law have HTTPS. So most of the websites that we go to are encrypted, and so it is quite safe to use them without a VPN, even on public Wi-Fi. The real danger in public Wi-Fi is that is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack, and this is where someone can remotely put spyware or malware onto your computer. In practicality, this is pretty rare, and it doesn't happen very often. Now, VPNs are mostly used in China because China is their internet is heavily censored. So VPNs are common, and that is where most of them make a lot of money, because they want to be able to take their signal and move it to the United States or Canada or some other part of the world where it's uncensored. Sometimes in the United States, you use a VPN because you can change the location where it appears that you're from, and people use this to try and stream Netflix in different countries so they don't have to pay twice. The problem is VPNs themselves can be a security risk. Most people don't want to pay for a VPN. They want a free VPN. But VPNs are inherently costly to maintain and run. So if you get a free VPN, then probably the people are selling your data. There are virtually no free VPNs that I would recommend using, because nothing in life is free. You do not need to use a VPN if you're using your cellular data. Remember, if you turn off your Wi-Fi and you use your cellular data, then you will be totally secure. It's like having your own VPN, and it's encrypted. And again, public Wi-Fi would be like at Starbucks, McDonald's, or Walmart. And be prepared to pay for a VPN service if you're going to use one. I think we'll just pass on that side. Now, when you're traveling, I want to talk about SIM cards. Everybody should understand that their phone, no matter what type of phone you have, has a SIM card in it. And these are an example in the picture today of 3 different sizes of SIM cards. Most of them are the nano size, which are the small cards, but there's the micro and the mini. If you look at your phone, and at the bottom I've showed you a little gate that pops out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is where you can put your SIM cards. And in fact, in a lot of your phones, and you can check this through your manual, will have actually two SIM card slots. You probably don't understand that, but you can actually run two SIM cards out of your phone, which means you could have an AT&T and a T-Mobile and have them both active in your phone. Why might you want to do this? Well, let's say you were in construction and you were building a big building, and you were building it and you were up on the 16th floor, and as you look, and maybe when you got all the way up there, one of your carriers didn't have good connection, so you could flip to the other carrier and use that carrier, because in the building there wouldn't be a telephone connection. Or maybe you're a farmer and you're doing a huge area of land. You're coordinating vehicles and trucks and stuff like that, and you go over the hill and boom, your cell phone doesn't work because it's got out of range of that particular tower. So then you can switch over and you can use a different carrier. So it is possible to use different carriers in your cell phone with SIM cards. Now, what these SIM cards are is they're the electronic connection to your provider. So you would, if you have a T-Mobile account, then you'll have a T-Mobile SIM card, and on that SIM card it has your phone number, so it's unique to that card. So all providers will give you should have a SIM card. Now, when you travel to different countries, you can purchase SIM cards which are right from the country that you go to, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And sometimes it works out very cheap for you, and I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. And we'll talk a little bit about how you change these cards. Let me just go to the next slide here. Right. Okay. So when we're going to change these cards and you're going to a hotel, it's always handy to have a flashlight. These devices are very, very small, and it's hard sometimes to see. So get your wife to shine a flashlight on your phone, because I find that's always helpful. The second thing is, particularly if you're a senior, you may have trouble seeing these and seeing which way to put them in. I would strongly encourage, before you take the SIM card out, is to have a look at how it's put in, because the one you're going to put in will go exactly the same way. If you take this out and put it down on the counter and go to find the other card to put in, you may have switched how it's going to go in. So you want to put it in exactly the same way. So I find a magnifying glass is helpful. Now, to get the gate open in your phone to change these SIM cards, you need a little device like this. Now, most of you got one of these when you bought your phone, but you never knew what it was for, so you've probably thrown it out. But these are the little devices that you put in a little hole on the side of your phone, and then the gate will pop out. In my experience, if you try to do this with a paper clip, the paper clip is too big. If your wife has a sewing needle, just take some pliers and cut the end of it off, and that's usually small enough to fit into those devices, and you just need to push it in, and then the gate will open, and you can change your SIM cards. Now, again, when you pick the SIM cards up, these are very, very small, and sometimes you might even need to use a tweezer. So again, when you get to a new country, you have a couple of choices. You can use the local SIMs. You can pick them up either at the airport, or you can pick them up locally in town. Sometimes in town it's easier, and you'll buy them, and it could be as much as $10 for a month of phone calls. You just put the SIM card in, and you'll be able to use it. You'll have a local phone number and data. Or the other option you have is to to use an international plan with your own cell phone provider. You can check with your provider, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, and you can actually use your own plan. And for those of you who have Pixel phones, or I'm trying to think, Pixel phones have electronic SIMs. There's actually no actual physical SIM in a Pixel phone. It's all done, it's done electronically, so it's very easy to use both an electronic SIM and a physical SIM in the phone. So you can choose, so that in that case you could use both. So I wanted to talk a little bit about traveling. If you look at this, this is a big map of the Pacific Ocean. I mentioned my daughter, one of our families lives in Australia. My wife and I hate traveling on airplanes, so this will be our third trip by cruise to Australia, and we'll be leaving Seattle at the end of September, and it takes 30 days to get to Sydney, Australia. Now, there's a lot of water in the Pacific Ocean, but this is the Hawaiian Islands up here. This is Mexico over here, and this is a little town called Apia, which is in way down here in the South Pacific. And when we got there, amazing how the cruise ship found it. We came along here and we docked at this in Apia, and Suva actually is the country, and this is the harbor, and this is where we docked. And this is our ship. This was the MS Nordam, and this is docked in Apia. Now, the problem with this is that I was doing a technology talk, and I wanted to talk about cell providers and what the data costs were in this little island in the middle of the ocean. However, this was their national holiday. And you know something? There wasn't a soul in town. Everything was closed. We'd gone all that way there. There were some people to greet us, but otherwise there was nobody around. But I did take some pictures of data plans that were in the window. And I'm not going to ask you to figure this all out because I did it for you. But if you went to Apia and you went to Samoa, you would actually, instead of using your own cellular data, if you wanted to purchase it, it was about 1/3 the cost of of the U.S. price. So you travel all the way there to this little island in the middle of the Pacific. You put a local SIM card in, and it's about a third of what the U.S. price was. So that's a very good deal. It's sort of cool. You wouldn't think that traveling into the middle of, Nowheresville would give you such a cheap price. Now, when we get to Australia, for those of you who have visited Australia, you'll know that the main grocery store in Australia is called Coles, C-O-L-E-S. Excuse me. And this is an interesting situation where my daughter is buying the groceries. After all these years, I bought the groceries, but now we go to visit, she buys the groceries. So while she was in Coles buying the groceries, I was looking at the cards here, and this is for data. Now, this shows you how extremely cheap in the Australia data was. So look at this. Now, in the United States, you can buy data. It's usually $10 a gigabyte. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes a bit less. So if you look at that, this was one of the counters, and you could buy 30 gigabytes of data in a month for $40. In the United States, this would be $300, and you could buy it. So data in the United States in Australia is extremely cheap. So if you were traveling to Australia and you were going to be there a month or so, and you wanted to have data, you wanted to have Wi-Fi, then my advice for you for that would be to, of course, just buy a SIM card because it's so cheap. Now, also there was they had a sale on, and again, you got the $30 plan you got for $10. So that was even crazy. you got 20 gigabytes of data, you got 10 bonus, you got 30 gigabytes for $10, and it was actually on sale. I mean, those deals are so crazy good. That would be a good example of using a local SIM card to provide data. Here's my two grandchildren. You won't find two cuter kids than those. So we want to talk a little bit about banking on your smartphone, because as you travel, you'll probably want to put a little more money in your credit card account, because you're probably going to be spending some money. So one of the commonest questions I get asked is it safe to do banking on your cell phone? Now, again, this depends. What you need to understand, and I think that I hope you would all understand how to turn off the Wi-Fi and make sure your cellular data is on. If you bank with your cellular data off your phone, it's encrypted. It's encrypted. So you do not need a VPN. It's extremely secure and it's very fast. Banks all use HTTPS, which is an encrypted signal, but your phone company, as a cellular data connection, is encrypted. So yes, you can do banking anywhere in the world. You can do it, but it makes sure you're using it over a cellular data connection, not Wi-Fi. All right. Now, banking with public Wi-Fi. So you don't have a connection for cellular data and you are stuck and you have to use public Wi-Fi. Well, again, the bank uses HTTPS. So there is no way that anybody is going to intercept the connection between your phone and the bank. They can't do that. The main reason I said that we like you to use a VPN is because of a common way people get your passwords, and this is a keylogger program. And it is possible when you go and you log into a public Wi-Fi access center or point that it could be the bad guy you're logging into. And then the person he would be able to see that you were logged into a bank, but he couldn't do anything about that because they wouldn't know what was happening. But they could access your cell phone and put a key logging program on so that when you went into your bank the next time, it would actually, your username and password would be sent to the bad guys. So we do recommend that you use a VPN. But please, if you're going to use a VPN, use a noted VPN, and you probably will have to pay $10 a month or something for it while you're traveling. Now, I just wanted to tell everybody, when you come home and you kick off your shoes and you finally had your trip abroad and you're going to fire up your home computer and you're going to do banking on your home computer, this may be the least secure form of banking that you can do, largely because I wanted to bring everybody's attention to the fact that you need to update your router. If you have an old router, 10-year-old router, you've never applied any of the firmware updates to it, you could be sitting with a very vulnerable system. So in fact, a little bit odd here, you've traveled all around the world, you've done all your banking, and you come home and you get hacked because you haven't updated your firmware or you have a real old router. So I like to just bring that up to everybody to remind you that your router is your primary defense against the bad guys, and you need to get it. You should have a relatively new router and you should keep it updated with the firmware. All right, let's do some traveling. Who travels by camel? Who travels by car, donkey, covered wagon? People travel in all different ways by land. So one of the things that you want to know about is, where am I? When you travel, you obviously need to know where you are. So we have different ways of figuring this out. Now, on all phones, you have what we'll talk about GPS. There is all your phones always have a GPS chip in them, and the GPS chip is always on. You can't turn it off. The apps can't disable that. So it is, and you do not need to be connected to the you do not need to be connected to the Wi-Fi, and you don't need to be connected to cellular data. So any phone that you have that's a smartphone will have a GPS chip in it, and it will be always on. Excuse me. Now, one of the things that you need to that has changed a lot in the last few years is the when we talk about GPS, we talk about global positioning satellites. And this is a proprietary term used by the US military. About 30 years ago, the US military put up about 24 satellites that go around the Earth in a geosynchronous orbit. And they provide the GPS signals that we pick up, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what you're going to see now is China now has their system called Compass. Europe has their system called Galileo. India has ARNIS, and Japan has QZSS. And the new ones that the United States put up last year are the GPS-3 satellites. And all these are supposed to now communicate and provide better help. So we'll see what happens. See what happens over the next few years. But I was looking on Amazon the other day, and some of the watches that have GPS in them were advertising that they not only had GPS-3, but they also had Galileo as a signal on them. They had two different GPS chips in them. So we'll be seeing over the next few years as we travel, and you may, if you're going to be doing some rural traveling, you may want to be looking at devices that use the local GPS signal. And so that will, let me just talk a little bit about let me talk about. So now, how does GPS work? And it's very interesting. You have these satellites, and you need 4 satellites to get a fix. You have all these satellites orbiting, and the satellites send a signal down to the person, and you're sitting there with your phone, and that's a GPS signal. Now, what happens is if you moved from here to a different location, obviously you're in a different it's a different location. And how does it know that you've moved from here to a different location? And that's time. It's all based on a timing sequence. So these satellites will be sending a signal down, and your phone actually measures the time it takes from here to this satellite. And so this is a timing sequence. Now, when you move about 100 yards down the road, and it's a different GPS location, that's because the timing sequence is different. Now, you're going to say, gee, Ron, that's, these satellites are hundreds of miles up. How can it do it? It must be a very, very small timing sequence. And the answer to that question is yes. And so what a GPS chip is on your phone is it's an atomic clock. That is what a GPS chip is on your phone. It's an atomic clock that measures the distance between these satellites, and it computes the latitude and the longitude. So on your phone will be able to display the latitude and the longitude. Now, you would think on cell phones that it would be quite easy to find the latitude and longitude, but in fact, it's not. Most of your cell phones, particularly Android, if I ask most of you, how would you get your latitude and longitude on your Android phone, you wouldn't know. Some of you may actually say, yes, I can open Google Maps and long press on the map, and that will give me my latitude and longitude. It is true. So there are ways in which you can get the latitude and longitude you need, but the easiest way to do that is to use and there are many programs, but this is my favorite. It's called My GPS Coordinates. You can download this. It's free. It's on the Android and Apple stores, and you download this and put it on your phone. So if you are in trouble, if you need help and you're dialing 911, you just push the button and bingo, it will bring up a big screen like this. It fills your whole screen with big numbers, and it will tell you your latitude and your longitude. And this is so important to give to the 911 call operator. Or when you're traveling in different parts of the world, if you need help, they will ask you where you are, and you need to know the latitude and longitude. It is important for you to understand if you are in trouble, if your car's got off the road, if you're in a lake and you're sinking, it's likely you won't have your glasses. You're going to be very stressed out about this. And so you need to just push a button and get big letters of what your latitude and longitude is so you can relay that for help. So I encourage everyone on their phones to have a program like this where you can easily identify where you are. And this will work anywhere in the world, and you don't need to be connected to the internet, and you don't need any cellular data. This particular one I like is called My GPS Coordinates, and this is what it looks like on the in the Android store. Just to let you know, this is what a GPS chip looks like, and it's just a tiny little thing like this, and it's installed in your phone, and all phones will have a GPS chip. It's always on, and it will always give you your latitude and your longitude. So when we're talking about maps and traveling, Google Maps is really a must. Now, Google Maps is available or is pre-installed on all your Android phones. So those of you who have Android phones, Google Maps will be on there. If you have an iPhone, then you can go to the iPhone store and download Google Maps. Now, what some of you may or may not know, but Google Maps can be used as an offline service. So you can actually download the maps onto your phone from Google Maps. In the example here you see, we have selected this area here, and you just hit download, and it will download the map onto your phone. This can be done anywhere in the world, so it doesn't matter where you're traveling. If you're traveling to England and you go to London, you could download the map of London, and then you have turn-by-turn guidance to walk around. It gives you all the points of interest, all the restaurant names, all the information that's on the regular Google Maps will be there as you download this onto your phone. So it really is a huge benefit. So whether you're walking, whether you're traveling or driving in a car or on a bus, the directions that you get by using Google Maps is important. Most people probably understand that, but they don't understand that this is downloadable and install on your phone. So you don't actually have to travel around with paper maps. It's interesting, when you're traveling now, there are many companies that have audio versions that can be added to Google Maps. For example, if you wanted to do a walking tour of downtown London, there are apps, there are programs you just would download onto your phone. It would link into Google Maps, and you would walk around and look at different structures, different buildings, and you'd have a little earbud in your ear, and it would be giving you a guided tour. So you don't actually have to take a physical tour. You can do this all yourself. So there are lots of really interesting things you can do. So I would really encourage you to get involved with Google Maps. Now, the next question that I get asked an awful lot is, what travel plans should I use? What are the best plans that I can use for traveling? And I mean, I can answer questions about this at the end, but I'm going to give you a few suggestions and that I've learned over the years. For those of you, let's take, for those of you who have discount plans, you may have consumer cellular, you may have different discount plans. Most of these plans do not offer any international travel or travel options. The same thing would happen in Canada if you had a TELUS or Rogers or Bell and you had one of their discount plans or discount carriers that relate to those plans, then they don't offer travel options for you. I'm not going to say that's true in forever, but for example, if you are a TELUS or a Rogers customer in Canada and you have a plan with them and you plan on coming down and spending your winters in Florida, the usual cost is about $30 a month for your to keep your phone and to have US data, so you can call home and have a data plan as well, and that's usually about $30 extra a month, which is about what you'd pay down in the United States anyway to buy a consumer cellular or whatever type of card you want to put in your phone. And the same thing goes in the United States. If you're going to be traveling and you don't have one of the big, if you don't have T-Mobile or you don't have Verizon and you have a discount plan, then you probably won't have the option of using a international plan. Now, a little tip that I'm going to tell you, this is the plan that I use. Most people don't know, but Google actually has their own telephone system. It's called Google Fi, and this is really, really an excellent program, particularly for Canadians. And I'll tell you how I use this. Google Fi is what we call an MNVO. Basically, it works off of T-Mobile, US Cellular, and Sprint. It works on the backs of those. And their plan that I have is $20 a month. So I use my plan, $20 a month, and that allows unlimited calling in the United States when I'm here in Arizona. And it gives me, and the data is $10 a gigabyte, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So all as I pay is $20 US, and that's it. Now, there are no roaming fees in 170 countries. So when I go back to Canada, there's no roaming fees. In fact, everything just works. Now, the data is the same, and I pay the same amount for the data. So there are no roaming fees. So my cell phone bill in Canada is $20. Now, it is true that I have to pay per call, but I use Skype and I use other VoIP systems on my phone, so I don't have to pay. The other thing that happens with Google Fi is they're extremely efficient in using data. So even though you pay $10 a gigabyte for this, if I use 0.2 gigabytes in a month, that's only $2. You don't pay the full amount. So my average phone bill in Canada for my cell phone with no data is around somewhere between $20 and $30 a month, which is really, really a good deal. So I like Google Fi, and then when I travel into different countries, I don't have to change SIM cards. I don't have to worry about extra plans. It's all, there's no roaming in 170 countries in the world. So Google Fi is one of the really great ones that you can use if you're traveling. The next one is that I really like is T-Mobile. Now, T-Mobile, they've changed their plans a lot, so you'll have to look. But basically, if you have a T-Mobile account, it's the same situation, is that there are no roaming charges in about 210 countries. So again, for traveling, you don't have to worry about roaming because that's all included in your plan. And so I think T-Mobile works well, and I have many of my friends who have T-Mobile accounts, and they just keep them down here and they use them in Canada when they go up to Canada. Verizon has a little bit different. They have what they call day passes. And so you actually can purchase a day pass and get a certain amount of data that you can use. This doesn't work well for long periods of time abroad, but if you're going for a 2 or 3 week vacation, then this can actually be quite good. Let's talk about air travel. Air travel on all airplanes usually has Wi-Fi. The airports all usually have free Wi-Fi that's acceptable to use, and although some do have paid, but it works quite well, and so you usually can be connected in the airport. I'd just like to remind everybody, I didn't put the slide in for this, but I just remembered this. Please don't use the charging ports in airports. You are seeing now a lot of airports are putting large charging ports in there. And I have a picture, I wish I'd put it in there, in Auckland, New Zealand. And there's, it looks like a big Christmas tree, and there's hundreds of cell phones plugged in for free charging. The problem is when you plug your phone into a charging port in an airport, you're connecting it by network to all those other phones. So it is an extremely insecure thing and very easy to hack. So please don't use public charging ports in airports. Just to show you here, this is the little hump on the back of the airplane, and this is where the Wi-Fi signal is, or sort of where the kind of the data signal comes into the airplane. So if you're planning on a long trip and you're going to think you want to use Wi-Fi on an airplane, it's always helpful to look ahead. Most of the airplanes or the companies will have plans that you can purchase prior to leaving, and these are always cheaper than ones you can buy on the plane. T-Mobile offers 1 hour per month of free Wi-Fi on airplanes, so you will be able to get that. A lot of the credit cards have Wi-Fi conditions on there, so you might, with certain credit cards, get free Wi-Fi. So check on this before you go, and it's and you might just be able to get on and hook on for free, depending on the situation in the airline. And yes, basically onboard Wi-Fi is available on most all airplanes. Now let's travel. Let's talk about traveling by sea. This is very interesting. You'll see, first of all, if I asked you, everybody, you all see this ship here in the middle of the ocean. This could have been my ship that we're traveling to Australia. If I asked all of you how this ship would get its internet signal, almost all of you would say by satellite, and you'd say these are the satellites that you would see on the ship that would be providing the internet to this ship. And in fact, you would probably be right. So of course, ships get their signal from the internet by satellite. Now, the problem is you wouldn't be right all the time, because if you look at this ship, of course, it looks like it's out in the middle of the ocean. But in actual fact, this is a site that tracks all the ships in the ocean. And what's interesting to know that ships actually don't transit in the middle of the ocean. They travel along the coastline. So they travel along this is the Alaskan coast here, or you can travel in the Caribbean, or over in the Mediterranean, or up along by Britain here. And ships really don't leave land very much. There are some transatlantic and transpacific crossings, but by and large, ships are never far from land. Most cruises are 7 to 10 days, and oftentimes they go through multiple ports. One of the things that's happened with the cruise lines now are, if I ask you what cruise line you'd like to go on, you might do some research and say, gee, I want to go on this one because it was great food. Or you might say, I want to go on this one because it was going to some interesting ports. But more and more now, people are choosing cruise lines because some of the cruises have very fast internet. Internet is really not an option anymore. That people demand fast internet, and this is a huge marketing issue for cruise lines now. They have to be able to provide extremely fast internet to keep their passengers happy. So how do they do that? Well, this is part of the marketing system that they use, and there's a big competition in the marketing of cruise ships in staying connected. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I wanted to remind everybody to please take your smartphone when you travel on a cruise ship. You may say to me, well, Ron, I'm going on a holiday. I don't want to be taking calls, or I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to take my smartphone. I'm going to leave my smartphone at home. Well, not a good idea, because a lot of the cruise ships, particularly the very large ones now, communicate with you for what we call their intranet. So when you board the ship, in fact, your phone will connect free of charge to the ship's Wi-Fi system. And this is where you'll be able to, this is off our, last time we went to Australia, this was off the MS Nordam. And this is my, they have a system called Navigator. And you can, if you push this button, you saw what was happening on board. You push this button, it was, you could book your tours. You put this one to order internet. If you wanted to order dining, you can do this one. You want to check your account, look at your itinerary. This was the communication that sort of glued the whole trip together. So you need some sort of device like this to connect and talk to people, or to book reservations in various restaurants and so on and so forth. In the old days, they used to give out paper, and in some ships they still do. I remember the Princess Patter was one, and can't remember all the different ships and what they call them, but they often gave you what to do the next day. But more and more now, particularly the large ships, are all just using the intranet. So always take your phone with you. Now, what we were talking about is how do you stay connected, and this is through terrestrial broadband. So when I talk to you about the fact that ships actually are traveling and they're getting this satellite or their internet feed from the satellite, that's only partly true. A lot of the ships now, and you'll see all the list here to the left, are actually using terrestrial broadband systems. These are like cellular connections to the ship. And if you look here on my map in green, you'll see these are, there's some up here on the west coast of Canada and Alaska here. You'll see some down in the Caribbean, and you'll see certainly lots over in the Mediterranean. These are large towers. They're like cellular towers that broadcast out to sea. And this is where ships actually can connect onto these and receive their data. So the ships, a lot of the ships now are receiving their data through this terrestrial broadband system. And the advantage being is latency. If you have a satellite-based system, the internet being two-way, you have an upload and download, there's a latency there. It takes time to go up to the satellite and come back down. If you use the terrestrial broadband, such as I've shown you here, the latency is much less, and the internet is, of course, a lot faster. So I think this is certainly used by a lot of ships to create fast internet. Now, the other thing that's changing is the satellite technology for broadcasting internet. There's a lot of money to be made on this, and there's certainly a lot of business models for it, because most ocean-going vessels will require and want fast internet. Now, in the example I gave you earlier, you would see a satellite broadcasting the signal down over the southern hemisphere. And as our ship transited on the route, it would pick up that signal being broadcast on the southern hemisphere. A new group of satellites that have been launched in the last 3 years called OB3 use a spot beam connection. Now this is different. This is actually where the satellites send a focus signal down onto the ship. And this particular satellite here, this system has a capacity of downloading about 10 terabytes of data, and they have 3,000 spot beams. So each customer would have one beam. So unlike the previous example where the satellite broadcast through the whole southern hemisphere, in this case, the spot beam would follow the ship. So as the ship transited across the ocean, the beam would follow the ship. So rather than having a large broadcast of this data, it would follow the ship in a very focused manner and be able to provide extremely high-speed internet in a very focused way to the customer. And this again is a new technology that a lot of the ships will be employing again to try and provide fast internet for you. The last item that you can buy if you're is a product called Roaming Man, and this is a device in which you rent and you carry it around with you, and it works in about 210 countries, and you buy data per day. You pay a per day fee, and it will provide you with data, and it connects cellularly and then broadcasts out to you as a Wi-Fi signal. This is a handy device, and you can, it's available in the United States, and you can, I've tested it and tried it, and you can take it from with you. And the nice thing about this is that you only have to buy it for the days that you want to use it. For example, if you're traveling on a cruise ship and you're going to be in port for 3 days and you want some cellular, or you want some data in those 3 days, then you only have to pay for the 3 days that you're going to use it. Interesting product. All right, I hope there's some questions. How did we do for times? I think we're right on time. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'll stand by for any questions.